I want to talk to you guys about how I use a ghost in time trial, and also just have a little bit of a discussion about time trial, how you should be approaching it, what you should be looking to do. Because I know that from coaching experience, from my own personal experience, just from talking to people on Discord, there can be a tendency for lower ranked drivers to grind hours and hours and hours in time trial and then not really come away a quicker driver from it. Just end up doing one magic lap, one lucky lap that you struggle to replicate again. I was guilty of that, absolutely. I don't think there's any low ranked drivers that aren't guilty of that. So I've learned a lot about how to time trial as I've got to my current level. So we're going to talk about how I use a ghost. The way I use a ghost is quite, I don't want to say unique, because I do know for a fact that there are other people who are quite fast, very fast even, that are using the ghost this way. But the way I use a ghost is very uncommon. And I'm going to talk about how I do it. I'm going to show you how I do it with some live footage of me using the ghost. You're going to see the ghost on the screen. And then I'm going to talk about what you should be doing when you're using the ghost this way, and also at what level you should potentially entertain using the ghost this way. So that's one thing we're going to talk about, and then we're going to have a quick discussion about the pitfalls and traps of time trial and how you should be approaching it going forwards. So this is the lap that we're going to take a look at. As you can see here, at the time of setting this on Thursday, I was global P11. A little bit mind-blowing there, a bit unexpected. I think it's a bit of an inflated position, if I'm honest with you. This has happened for two reasons. Number one, I like Group 2. It's my favourite class. I just particularly love the way these cars handle, both the GT1 cars and the 16 cars. Not so keen on the 08 cars, but I still love Group 2 as a whole. And number two, Group 2 is never really the most popular class. So there's a lot of competitive drivers here that just haven't bothered setting lap times. So don't read too much into global P11. There's at least 50 odd people that are faster than me who haven't set a time. But let's take a look at the lap. So let's talk about the ghost first, and then we'll have a quick chat about time trial in general. So I set the ghost to either 0.01 or 0.00. So you're about to see that when we cross the line here. You see that the ghost comes up right in front of my screen and is actually occupying almost my entire screen at this point where it hasn't pulled away from me. So the first question coming to your mind is, why do I set the ghost this close? I also use sector reset. That's important. There's a lot of people that don't know about sector reset, so make sure you've got that turned on if you're using a ghost. And if you're not a top 10 driver, which I'm not, then you're going to need sector reset. So first question that's coming to your mind, no doubt, is why do I set the ghost this close? Right. The primary reason I set the ghost this close is so that I can see precisely where my time loss is. So the moment that ghost starts to move away from you there, I now know that I braked more than wind. This is using wind's ghost, by the way. So that's the primary reason I set it to this distance. I will normally start with setting it at 0.1, and then as I get faster through the sector, and I want the ghost to be right with me toward the end of that sector, I'll move to setting the ghost at 0.0. So why do I think this is important? Because if you set the ghost at 0.3, which is typical for most people will set the ghost at 0.3. What happens is that ghost is really only usable for one or two corners. Let's say you are a typical average B or A ranked driver. I think those are the largest demographics in the game. And let's say you set the ghost at 3/10 away. By the time you've gone 2 or 3 corners into a sector, the ghost has gotten so far away that it's not actually of any use to you anymore. It's just another car in the distance. So I first started doing this as an effort to keep the ghost closer to me over the course of the sector, so that it could actually be of use to me towards the end of the sector and not just on the first 1 or 2 corners. The first thing that you're almost undoubtedly thinking is, how do you focus on where you're going? How do you see where you're going with the ghost that close? That's entirely distracting. I could never do that. So when I first did this, yes, I felt exactly the same way about this, but I would urge, give it time, try it. The most important thing is that you don't look directly at the ghost. when it is occupying your entire screen at 1/10 distance, you have to look through the ghost. So that comes down to correct vision. That comes down to where should you be looking when you're driving anyway. Essentially, you don't do anything different. You just look where you should be looking, which is far ahead. You don't actually look directly at the ghost. I will occasionally look directly at the ghost just to see when he stops braking, which again, you can only see when you are that close to the ghost. Now, I'm not saying by any means that this is the only way to use a ghost. There are plenty of fast drivers out there that use a ghost a very different way. So, who should consider maybe doing this, and at what level should you consider maybe doing this? Well, I think you should consider doing this if you feel like you're stuck in time trial. If you feel like you're doing hours and hours of time trial for that one lucky lap that you can never replicate again, then this has got to be worth a try, hasn't it? It's got to at least be worth giving it a go and seeing if you can get used to it and seeing if it can help you improve your times. At what level do I think you should do this? Well, I did this first as a B-ranked driver. I did this as a B-ranked driver in order to try and keep the ghost closer to me, because the ghost would just scamper off into the distance by the time I got to the end of that sector. So, let's talk now about how you should be approaching the time trial session using this ghost technique. So I said the principal reason for doing this is so that I can see immediately where my time loss is. Now, what we mean by that is, over the course of a sector or a lap, when you have the ghost this close, it becomes immediately obvious where your weakest corners are. So what you should actually be doing in time trial is fixing corners as opposed to just grinding laps. So a lot of my time trial session is spent not actually time trialing. What I'll do is, when I see the ghost pull away from me on a given corner to an unacceptable amount, is I will try and remedy that whilst driving as best as possible. So what you're looking for there is when you overtake the ghost in the braking zone, which again you will only notice if you are right on top of the ghost. If the ghost is 3/10 ahead of you, you're not going to see that you are catching the ghost in the braking zone. If that happens, I immediately know I'm braking too late. If the ghost pulls away from me in the braking zone, I immediately know I'm either braking too early or braking too much. So this information can then be corroborated by the replay. You go and analyse the replay and you see that same thing in the replay. And that's my next step. So if I can't find satisfactory improvement on a given corner following the ghost, then I'll go into the replay, analyse what he's doing in that replay, and then try and find an improvement that way. And then it comes back to using the ghost again. So when you're following the ghost, you try and make sure you're braking at exactly the same point. You try and make sure that you're taking exactly the same line. Is your line offset to his line? Do you appear to be turning before him or turning later than him? Are you releasing the brake at the same time as him? I can see all of this stuff from the replays and from following the ghost. Ultimately, you're looking to strengthen at least your one or maybe two weakest corners on a given track when you're time trialing. If you can strengthen your weaknesses on the lap, then you will become a quicker driver in that time trial session. Rinse and repeat this week in, week out, and you ultimately just become a quicker driver, period. And doing it this way, the ghost becomes the acid test of whether your time trial session has been productive. Because what you should see from the beginning of a time trial session to the end of the time trial session is that on your weakest corners, the ghost now does not pull away as much. You're not going to get to the point where the ghost doesn't pull away at all. Like, if I could do that, I could match Wynn's time. But we're looking for the ghost to pull away less than it did, and that then becomes the acid test for whether your time trial session has been productive and whether you've done your work correctly. Now, I know there's going to be quite a few people watching that are saying, even if I set the ghost at 0.0 or 0.1, it's still going to vanish into the distance by the time I get to the end of that sector. Yeah, absolutely true, but that's only even more reason why you should use the ghost this way, or why you should try using the ghost this way and see if you can get on with it. Because if you set that ghost at 0.1, at least that ghost becomes usable for the first two corners of a sector. So by default, those are the corners you're going to have to try and fix, regardless of whether they appear to be your weakest corners or not. They're the only corners where the Ghost is usable. So fix those corners, improve those corners until eventually, over the course of time, with the passage of time, the Ghost eventually becomes usable over more and more corners. That's what I've seen doing this as a B rank driver, and it's what I'm seeing in certain coaching students who have also adopted this way of using the Ghost. So in conclusion then, I'm not saying this is the only way to use a Ghost. If you're an accomplished driver watching this, then I'm not really talking to you. You already know what you're doing, you found your own way, there's no need to change anything. If you feel that you are making progress in your driving, if you're a B rank, C rank, A rank driver and you still feel like you're making progress, don't worry necessarily about trying this, just carry on doing what you're doing. The important word there is progression or achievement. If you've achieved a strong level, or if you feel like you're progressing well, then there's no need for you to necessarily change anything you're doing with the Ghost or time trial, at least not at the moment. But if you feel like you've hit a wall, if you feel like you grind hours and hours and hours in time trial, if you feel like your time trial lap at the end of the week is a lucky lap that you can't get anywhere near again, then this is definitely a red alert, an alarm bell for looking at your time trial and saying, what are you doing in your time trial? So maybe this is worth giving a go. At the very least, the concept of what I'm trying to talk about with time trial here, even if you don't use the Ghost this way, the way you should be approaching your time trial should be exactly the same. You should be looking at it as an opportunity to fix mistakes and find improvement. And once again, I'm not saying this is the only way to use a Ghost. There are plenty of fast drivers who use Ghosts very differently to me, but it's something to consider if you have hit a wall. Maybe this technique will help you. Alright, thank you for watching as always. If you want to deep dive these topics a little bit more, or quite a lot more, then please come and see me for a coaching session, and I will try and be back with another video next week for you. Take care, see you later.